Namaskar. Today we are starting with verse 26 of chapter 3. न बुद्धिभेदं जनयेत् अज्ञानां कर्मसंगिनां जोषयेत् सर्वकर्माणि विद्वान् युक्तः समाचरन्. Literal meaning: a wise man should not try to argue with or to convince people who perform karma with a desire for fruit. On the contrary, he should perform that karma without any desire and develop a liking in those people for performing that karma. Practical insight: wise men with understanding of spirituality should not try to argue and convince ordinary people to follow their spiritual way of life. The ordinary people are still deeply rooted in the worldly life. They perform karma expecting a fruit thereof for themselves. It is therefore futile to expect them to follow the karma yoga philosophy of performing karma without bothering about fruit. It is therefore a very common experience that a person who gets interested in spirituality and gains some knowledge immediately starts preaching to others in his family or friend circle. He not only fails miserably in converting them to the spiritual way, but he may even risk becoming doubtful himself about his own beliefs and practices. This is because he himself is still raw and his spiritual pursuit may still be tentative. So another person arguing from a purely worldly perspective may sow the seeds of doubt in the mind of the beginner on the spiritual path. It is therefore wise not to bother about converting anyone to spirituality. A wise man should simply set an ideal through his own actions for those of the others who may want to follow them. Verses 27, 28 and 29. प्रकृतेः क्रियमाणानि गुणैः कर्माणि सर्वशः अहंकार विमूढ़ात्मा कर्ता अहमिति मन्यते तत्त्ववित्तु महाबाहो गुणकर्म विभागयोः गुणागुणेषु वर्तन्त इति मत्वा न सज्जते प्रकृतेर्गुणसम्मूढाः सज्जन्ते गुणकर्मसु तान् कृत्स्नविदो मंदान् कृत्स्नविन्न विचालयेत्. Literal meaning: although all the karmas are happening because of the attributes of Maya, one who is under the illusion of ego thinks he is the one who has performed those karmas. O Arjuna, one who understands the principle of the different attributes, that is gunas, and the organs of action, that is karmendriyas, believes that gunas reside in their place, that is, with the external contacts of sense organs, and hence he does not get attached to them. Those who are enamored by the attributes of Maya get attached to the karmas performed by those attributes. A wise man should not argue with or try to convince such dim-wit ignoramuses. Practical insight: we are made up of the three gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas. Gunas can be looked at as our genetic makeup. The relative proportion of these gunas dictates our attitudes and actions. Now, when I say that I am doing this particular action, it is a very vague concept of I, just a bundle defined by the physical body. However, we do not know nor do we have any control over the process that actually produces the action. Our thoughts are not under our control. Even a simple physical action of moving our hand requires small contributory actions by many different cells. Then how can we say, I am doing this? Often we agonize over different options for action available, and we do not know what exactly drives our thinking process to arrive at the final decision. We often take an action though our mind is unwilling to do it. Our likes and dislikes develop in a way we may not be able to explain. For example, two brothers growing up in the same household may develop different tastes. All in all, our actions seem to be the result of a very complex process. It is almost as if there is some kind of a computer software program inside each one of us with a complicated algorithm that is the driver of our action. So why should our conscious idea of I be regarded as the doer? We are therefore advised through these verses to not get attached to our actions and their apparent outcome. However, those without any understanding of this concept get attached to their ego and believe, I, I am doing this. But wise people should let such ignoramuses be and not try to argue with them or convince them, because they will never get convinced until and unless a desire for a spiritual way of life stabilizes in them. Verse 34 of chapter 3. Indriyasyendriyasyarthe ragadveshau vyavastitau tayorna vashamagacchettau yasya paripanthinau. Literal meaning. Either desire for the external sense contacts or hatred for them is always associated with the sense organs. One should not fall prey to that desire and hatred because they destroy us. Practical insight. Our five sense organs are programmed in such a way that they like some things and dislike some others. For example, our skin is comfortable with temperatures within a narrow range where we feel pleasantness. But outside of that range, we feel unpleasantness. We want something that pleases our sense organs to continue all the time. However, the pleasant feeling that the sense organs have does not last for long. Besides, in the real world, things do not remain the same for long. Then why crave for something that is so short-lived? And we hate something that is unpleasant for our sense organs, and we even get angry at having to suffer that unpleasantness. But we should remember that anger and hatred are causes of the destruction of human beings. Therefore, it is wise to not give too much importance to how sense organs perceive things, because that is their nature. We should cultivate an ability to take sense pleasures and displeasures with equanimity by training our mind through constant contemplation. Verse 35. Shreyan swadharmo viguna paradharmat swanashtitat swadharme nidhanam shreya paradharmo bhayavaha. Literal meaning. Even though our swadharma may be faulty, it is better than paradharma, that is somebody else's duties, howsoever well performed the latter may be. Even if one dies while acting in accordance with swadharma, it leads to one's welfare. Paradharma causes fear. Practical insight. Swadharma is the way of living that is appropriate to one's own individual aptitude, liking, makeup, and situation. So, what is important to understand is that one must live in an individual way without comparing it with the way someone else lives. Everyone's situation may be different, and hence the way of living for another person may not be appropriate for me. However, we often tend to compare our life with that of someone else and start wanting the so called good things that the other person seems to be enjoying. But since my situation is different from that of the other person, if I try to do what he is doing, it may amount to a misfit, like putting a square peg in a round hole. Also, that kind of an attempt is more likely to fail because of the misfit, and this fear of failure is very damaging. From a macro perspective, this verse can be interpreted to mean that there is a tremendous variety in this creation. Everyone has a different role of his own, and that way the big picture is made perfect. If we abandon our role and covet someone else's role, it can lead to chaos. That is also the reason why equality needs to be understood correctly. Equality cannot mean everybody having everything in equal proportion. That is not possible. Equality in modern times can be understood as equality of opportunity, with this qualification that everyone must first assess his own individual situation and capabilities, aptitude, and then avail of the appropriate opportunity. Equality does not mean, for example, forcibly making someone a doctor who is not capable of becoming a good doctor. In other words, the modern political concept of positive discrimination, that is, reservations and special props for the underprivileged, runs against the crux of this verse. It not only makes life difficult for the person with less capabilities, but it also degrades the functioning of the society as a whole. Verses 36 and 37. अर्जुन उवाच अथ केन प्रयुक्तः अयं पापं चरति पूरुषः अनिच्छन्नपि वार्ष्णेय बलादिव नियोजितः. श्री भगवान उवाच काम एष क्रोध एष रजोगुणसमुद्भवः महाशनो महापाप्मा विद्येनमिह वैरिणम्. Literal meaning. Arjun said, O Krishna, even though the Jivatma may not desire sense pleasures, what pushes him into sinful actions? Shri Krishna said, it is this kama, that is desire, and krodha, that is anger, that push the Jivatma. They arise out of rajas guna, the attribute that causes desire leading to a lot of activity. This rajas guna has an insatiable appetite and is a big sinner. You should regard it in this world as an enemy. Practical insight. When spiritual wisdom has it that sense pleasures should not be sought, then a doubt arises as to why is it that we fall prey to them. The reason is that we are driven by a basic desire or lust to enjoy this physical world and the pleasures that our sense organs experience when in contact with the various external objects. This lust is an inherent aspect of the way we are made, an attribute of rajas guna. Rajas guna is activity oriented. So it is the one that creates a lust and pushes us into some action to fulfill that lust. When the lust seems to be not getting fulfilled, we get angry and are pushed into even more action. That is the vicious cycle that Rajas Guna puts us into. That is why we need to be conscious of it. There are three types of desires: sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. Sattvic desires are those that relate to spirit rather than the physical. For example, a desire to go to a temple or on a pilgrimage place or to a pilgrimage place, etc. Rajasic desire is one that is sense or ego driven. For example, eating good food or looking for praise from the boss. Tamasic desire is one where we want to get sadistic pleasure out of some harm to some other person or by simply being lazy. Whenever we get a desire, we should ask ourselves what kind of desire it is. If it is a sattvic one, we should immediately proceed to fulfill it, because if we debate on it, we may drop it. If the desire is rajasic, we should ask ourselves if it is really necessary to fulfill it. We should try and postpone action on it and have a rethink after some time. Then we may often find that the desire drops off on its own. If it doesn't, then only we should try to fulfill it, but in as moderate way as possible. In case of a tamasic desire, we should straightaway try and discard it. Verses 39, 40, 41 and 43. Avrutam jnanametena jnanino nityavairina kamarupena kaunteya dushpurena analena cha indriyani mano buddhi rasyadhisthanamuchyate etair vimohayatyesha jnana mavritya dehinam tasmat tvamindriyanyadau niyamya bharatarshava papmanam prajahyenam jnana vidnyana nashanam evam buddhe param buddhva संस्तभ्यात्मानम् आत्मना जहि शत्रुं महाबाहु कामरूपं दुरासदम्. Literal meaning: this kama, which is always inimical to wise men and is like an insatiable fire, covers the real self-knowledge. Kama resides in sense organs, mind and intelligence. So it covers the knowledge by means of sense organs and causes the Jivatma to fall into delusion. So Arjuna, you should first get control over sense organs and kill the greatly sinful kama that destroys scriptural and experiential knowledge. O Arjuna, you should thus understand the Supreme Soul, which is beyond intellect, and attain your stability and be victorious over the enemy that kama is. Practical insight: lust is the greatest enemy of spiritual seekers. Desires are so powerful that they occupy one's mind completely to the exclusion of all the wisdom. That is why it is very critical for a sincere spiritual seeker to work towards reducing and eliminating desires. For that, control over sense organs is necessary. Only then he can get the spiritual wisdom necessary for liberation and self-realization. Here chapter 3 is complete. So I'll stop here and continue the next time with the next chapter. Until then, bye. Take care.